Hello and welcome to another edition of Business and Financial Raw Talk, a no holds barred forum for leaders and innovators. I am LaWanna Bradford, and I'm so excited because today I have a very special guest. But before I get into who this is that will be gracing our platform, I want to ask you, are you that executive that senior level professional that is trying to navigate in these uncertain times? Have perhaps you found yourself kind of wondering what's going to happen? Maybe you're affected by the recent government shutdown. Maybe you're a contractor wondering, oh, am I still going to have this job once things open up? Or perhaps you're in a situation where you're just trying to explore your options. You're looking at how to navigate your career, or perhaps you're one that you love what you do, you're skilled at what you do, but you want to do it in a new environment and you really don't know how to navigate those waters. Well, that's why I have the special guest, Lisa L. Baker, here today. She is an expert in transformational growth when it comes to leadership and executive coaching. Her firm, Accentum, is a professional award-winning leadership development and coaching platform. Her firm works with individuals in the C-suite as well as teams to help them navigate this changing landscape, because we know just as the bottom line, as we're looking at that bottom line and making sure that we're agile and adaptable, we have to also look at ourselves professionally. Do we have the right skill sets? Are we positioned to remain relevant in the changing marketplace? I'm excited because I'm bringing someone that has expertise, that has been there, done that, and got the t-shirt, as you often hear me say. Not only is she a member of Forbes Council, but she's been featured in Forbes, in Ebony Magazine. She also has over 2 decades of experience working with Fortune 500 companies like Microsoft, Synchrony, and Citicorp. Her focus is really in helping individuals to maximize their impact and impression when it comes to living their best life, but doing what they love, being recognized for what they love, and being able to tap into transformational growth. We'll be back in just a moment with none other than Lisa L. Baker. How's it going, Lisa?
It's going great, LaWanna. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit with me and just kind of talk about what's happening in the world and hear some of your tips and strategies that people can take in order to navigate these waters, and even tap into you and your expertise and possibly partnering with you in going forward.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this conversation today.
Well, I told the audience a little bit about you, but I want them to hear in your words what Accentum is all about.
Thank you for the opportunity. Accentum is an executive coaching and leadership development practice. I started the company almost 5 years ago after exiting corporate America. And I did that so that there would be a space for high performing leaders to get the support that they need to grow and lead in a way that feels very aligned to who they are, what they value, and the impact they want to have, the legacy that they want to leave.
I love that. I'm going to show our audience a little clip, and then we're going to get right into this conversation.
Welcome to a new kind of coaching, a place where high achievers and big dreamers can finally get the guidance they need to level up and go farther than they ever thought possible. Accentum exists for those who are ready to live their best life, for those who dare to dream their biggest dreams. We believe in progress, not perfection. We believe in moving forward, and our trajectory is always upward. Ascend with Accentum.
Well, I want to ask you a question. You said something there, and I hear people using this a lot. We hear living your best life, right? So What is living your best life? I was talking actually to another executive, and I used that term, and he said, "What does that really mean?" I
Yeah.
hear it, it sounds good, but what is it? So I want to just ask you, how do you help people find their best life? Because we're so conditioned, right? You go to school, you get your education, and you make sure you fit just perfectly in this box. And it feels a little uncomfortable until it doesn't. And then you're wondering, well, what is my best life? What would you say to individuals who are kind of struggling with that?
Yeah, so much of what we're taught and told is designed to put us in a particular box. We hear a lot about what we should do, what we ought to desire next. But for me, living your best life begins with first getting really clear about who you are. What I mean by that is, what do you love doing? What is your purpose? Like, what's the reason that you do what you do? Why are you here? What's the impact that you want to make? Because truly, the definition of best life is going to vary from person to person. Best life for me means I get to do the work that I love every day in coaching and helping people to grow. But it also means that I am available for my family, to spend time with my grandkids, to do the things that really fill me up and bring me joy. And so I would say your best life is the life that allows you to lead boldly, live fully, to make the impact that you want to make. Often I'll go through an exercise with my clients where I ask them to envision that they're having a retirement party, and their family, their friends, former colleagues are all coming to celebrate this milestone in their lives. And then each person, one by one, if they choose to, has the opportunity to come up and say something about what you have meant to them, how they met you, the impact that you've had on their life. And when they do that visioning exercise, I ask them, what is it that you want to hear people say when they talk about how they know you, the impact that you've made? And when they have that really clearly in their sights, then I ask them, are you living today? Are you leading in a way today that will make that vision possible when you reach that point? If the answer is no or not fully, then you're not yet living your best life.
I like that. I love the visioning exercise. And then you said, okay, are you doing the steps to get you there, right? Or is that just hope methodology? I hope that somehow some pixie dust gets sprinkled and somehow I will arrive there. But we know that greatness requires discipline and it requires focus. And you said something I do have to read because I don't want to misquote you. You said, we all have an area of greatness where strengths, passion, and purpose converge.
Absolutely. We all absolutely have that unique area of greatness. And you said it correctly. Our strengths are those things that we are naturally good at. It's also the skills that we develop over time from the work that we do and the experiences that we have. Our passions are the things that we love to do, that we enjoy, that fill us up, that give us that meaning in life. And purpose is your why. Why do you do what you do? Why does it matter? Who are you here to serve? When you can get those three to align, the things that you're good at doing, that you enjoy doing, and that really fulfill your purpose, meet your why, that space where all of those things come together is your area of greatness. And no two people have the exact same area of greatness. When you lead from your greatness, then you're being authentic. You have power from that space. There's no competition in that space because there's only one you and one person who has that exact same combination of strengths, passion, and purpose. And the beauty of that is if I'm operating in my area of greatness, LaWanna, and you're operating in yours, and we have some alignment, maybe we share similar passions, maybe we have similar strengths, and we then can then put them together and create exponential impact. That's the beauty of operating from your area of greatness.
And I love what you said, Lisa, and you're exactly right. And I know when I'm dealing with my clients, I always remind them that when you are in your lane of genius, you've designed this blueprint of your life, of your career, of your business. The only one you can't compete with is you. And as you said it so beautifully, you are perfectly aligned with all of your gifts, all of your talents. There's only one you at this appointed time to do what you do. But often individuals get so distracted and infected with what I like to call comparisonitis. They're busy looking to the left, they're looking to the right, and they're not doing them. They're not being. And you use the statement you said, we need to focus on being versus doing. Can you unpackage that for us a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So much of leadership and in work and life, right? We're told to do. You have to grind. You need to get this done, accomplish all the milestones. In work, especially in corporate spaces, things are set up based on the milestones you need to hit, the bottom line that you need to drive. And so we get so focused in doing. It's how we're rewarded. We get rewarded for the things that we do, right? And so that becomes the primary focus. But what happens is, in all of that doing and all of that motion that we sometimes mistake for momentum, we lose the sense of who we really are. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Do I even enjoy what I'm doing? We don't have enough time even to stop and ask ourselves those important questions because we're moving from one milestone to the next, checking one box or another. And so there's this busyness that happens. And in the fast paced, ever changing environment that we're currently living in, where it's increasingly more complex, it is much more global than it's ever been. With technology, the pace is changing even faster than it ever has before. And so we're doing constantly to keep up or feeling like we're falling behind. So we have to do more to stay ahead.
So with you, Lisa, I mean, it sounds easy, all right? Okay, just be and breathe. But how did you get there? I mean, what was it? Because that's not. I think perhaps when we are born, it's innate for us to just be, right? We don't stop a baby from just expressing themselves, but then we become constrained by rules, norms, right? Biases and everything else, so we try to fit in order to be accepted, and to conform, and we feel that that really is the way to go until suddenly it feels uncomfortable. What was it for you that gave you that aha moment that, somehow this doesn't feel right and I really need to uncover and unpackage who I am? And I use the term uncover and unpackage because I believe we're always there. For whatever reason, we just can't see ourselves, but we're always there.
Yeah, we are always there, and we lose sight of ourselves because of, like you said, all of the pressures that are around us. And I would say it is not easy. And I don't want to give anyone impression that it is easy. It's simple. It is simple, but it is not easy. And it's not easy because of the world that we live in and because of all of the shoulds that we hear along the way and take to heart. The transformation for me happened during the time that I was working for Microsoft. I had been with the organization about 6 years when a new regional vice president came into the business. At the time, I was a marketing director in the East region and had been doing well at the company. I'd gotten a promotion. But when he came in the very first meeting that I had with him face to face, he said to me, and I quote, "Lisa, I didn't ask the team who's the person that adds the least value, but I'm sure if I had asked them that they would have said you." Now imagine my surprise in hearing those words. It really felt like a gut punch, LaWanna. I had never been the bottom of anything, never been an underperformer. And so to hear those words was really, it was very tough to hear, quite frankly. But I'm not one to back away from a challenge. So I said, you know what? I'm going to prove him wrong. He doesn't know me. What would make him say that? And so for almost another year, I really set out to do more, work harder, fit into the lane, the space, the boxes that I thought I should fit into in order to prove that I wasn't the weakest link, that I deserved my spot on the team. And then I had my second meeting with him, which quite frankly was for me worse than the first meeting. And it was worse because I was in uncontrollable tears in that meeting with him. And that came because, first, because I was angry. And I didn't want to say something that I would later regret. And so I was kind of trying to hold in my emotions, but instead they came out in tears. And the more he spoke, the more uncontrollable my tears became, because he went to a whiteboard in the meeting room and proceeded to draw 9 blocks on the board to explain to me how Microsoft views leaders. One axis is your performance in role from low, medium to high. The other axis is the company's belief about your future potential with the company. Low, medium, or high probability that you'll be promoted 1 or 2 levels within the next 18 months. And he told me that in his opinion, I was in the bottom left box. That meant I was a low performer and there was a very low probability that I was going someplace in the company. Yeah, exactly. I was literally
Yeah.
speechless, and all I could do was exit that meeting as quickly as possible. And I knew right then and there that I was not going to change his mind, that I could never do enough to be what he wanted or thought I needed to be for what he wanted on his team. Now, I could have made all sorts of assumptions and reasons as to why. And I thought about it. Was it that I was one of the only of a very few number of Black people on the team? Was it because I was a female? What? So many things I could have guessed, but it didn't matter. Frankly, I decided that it wasn't going to work for me, and so I made a bold choice, and I went and asked the company, specifically the woman who was my boss, because the regional VP was her boss, so he's 2 levels above me. I asked her to sever me from the company, to eliminate my role as they would if I had been part of a RIF, and then pay me whatever the company policy says I was owed for 7 years of service with the company and my position having been eliminated. I also asked her if they would promote the person who had been working for me. She was a contractor. I knew she would have loved to be a full-time Microsoft employee. So I asked them to promote her into the role that they eliminated me from. I said, it's a win for everybody. I leave, my employee gets a promotion, and he gets me off of his team. And I was pleasantly surprised that they said yes to all of that. And the great news is that before I left the company, I had already had another job lined up with what is now Synchrony. And when I left Microsoft, moved to Synchrony, my new boss at Synchrony said to someone when he didn't think I could overhear him as I was walking away, he said, "That's the best hiring decision I ever made." Now, which is it? Was I the weakest link, low performer, not going anywhere? Or was I the best hiring decision that someone made? The truth is, I was both, because those were 2 different people with 2 different opinions. But what I realized is I was the same person. I had not changed. So I had done all the things at Microsoft that I thought I should do, looking the way I thought I should look for the executive presence that you're supposed to have, checking all the boxes, doing all of the things, but it didn't really net me anything because one new leader came in and decided I wasn't right for his team. So that transformation that happened was me saying, wait a minute, I didn't change. So rather than trying to be something that I think I should or that someone has told me I ought to be, why don't I just be me? Why wouldn't I just show up as my authentic self and let the chips fall where they may, so to speak? That was a huge turning point for me. My career took off from there when I stopped trying to be what I thought I needed to be and just determined to show up as myself with my strengths, my experiences, all that I brought to the table. Certainly being appropriate for the environment, but not trying to conform or twist myself into some shape that really wasn't my own.
Yeah, it's amazing when you were explaining that. Like you said, you had two people, two perspectives, and you could have embraced either one, but you said, I need to reflect on who I am. And you have a very strong personality. Many people would fall into feeling defeated, not feeling valued, not feeling worthy or deserving, just accepting just to keep a job. And that takes us into where we are right now in this country. To those of you that are watching, we're filming from the US. There's a lot of turmoil going on, not just in the government, contract, private sectors. There's a lot of shifts, changes, reductions, mergers, layoffs. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it's very easy right now for people dealing with mental and emotional crises. I mean, after the pandemic, we were talking about the second pandemic is emotional and mental well-being. And now you have things happening at such a rapid pace. And I heard you say, being agile and being flexible. Well, just 2 weeks ago, America looked very different than it does today. Right? The federal workspace looked very different than it does today. You look at your major contracting firms, $17.5 billion was stripped from the federal government that was going out to these companies that were providing the services that we need in order to be the America that we promised to be for our citizens. In your position now, today, what do you do with that? I mean, how do you help decision makers understand that even though you may have those that still remain, there's guilt, right? Because they feel like, okay, I made it, at least this wave, I'm safe, but they feel bad for their colleagues that are gone. They're living in an ongoing state of fear and angst. And I want to bring this up. I was looking at some recent stats, and it said of the workforce, you have 80% of those that are under the executive ranks that are very discontent with work. 80%, that's a very high number.
Very high.
And then you have the converse, where they say 80% of executives are very pleased with where they are. Now, this is where I'm going to challenge you. So when we look at our marginalized communities and the representation or the lack thereof, that's who I want you to, that's what I'd like you to paint the picture of, is what does corporate America look like when it comes to representation of people of color, especially women in executive ranks, and how do these people really feel?
Yeah, I'm so glad you're bringing this up. This is, after all, called raw talk, right? So let's have that raw talk. The reality is that, as you said, we have changed in this country recently. And frankly, with the attack, dare I say it, on diversity, equity, and inclusion in this country, we are going backwards, in my humble opinion, in terms of the level of diversity. And we're still not where we needed to be. So there are few people of color in executive leadership positions. When it comes to women, few, and Black women especially, even fewer still. I think women of color, the last time I checked, we were less than 5% of those top roles in corporate America. Women, actually, it's lower than that because women in total are about 6% of those very, very senior roles. Women of color, even less than that. And that problem is being exacerbated. And then you talk about, so what are we feeling? Well, yeah, the people at the top are feeling better about themselves and their role because they're making the most money, so they aren't as impacted by the changes that we're seeing in the world, people being layoffs, et cetera. So they're not as impacted. And they are increasingly looking more like each other and having similar beliefs, value systems, et cetera. And so it's comfortable in those spaces. But what the numbers don't tell you about those very senior roles is that there is a loneliness epidemic at the top. CEOs and people in those very high seats feel very lonely because it's isolating being up there at the top and feeling that disconnect from people lower, and the amount of time that they're spending working and the increased pressure because of the rapid pace of change is increasingly isolating. And that's the challenge we're dealing with. So you have this big gulf of people who are at the lower ends of the organization, from entry level probably up to about mid-manager, where there is a lot of fear, there's concern about whether they're even going to keep a job. Some people are quiet quitting, so they're still in the seat, but they've checked out mentally and emotionally because of the stress and the pressures, yet they need to stay because they need the paycheck, quite frankly. And then you've got the very top of folks who are still making the bulk of the money. The disparity in income is huge. So they don't have the financial worries as much, but then they're isolated and dealing with the pressures that come from the very top and from outside the organization that says you have to operate a certain way, especially if you want to continue to get funding and support from the government.
Yeah. I want to read some of these stats to you. And the reason why is because we know that there are conversations that are happening by powers that be that we're going to minimize the analytics that are out there. That's telling us the true story. So the S&P 100, women make up 29% of top senior leaderships. But of the 500 CEO spots of the S&P 500, okay, 500 spots, only 41 are women.
Yeah.
Then it goes down to overall C-suites, and these are numbers coming from Spencer Stewart study. It says women of color make up approximately 4% of C-suite. And I want to toss this ball to you because this is very serious. So number one, we're dealing with rapid change. We're dealing with possibly changing the truth of our analytics. And then we're being told that DEI is bringing too many people of color, too many people who look like you and I into the workspace. But the data is saying, hello, you only have 4%. Of 500, you have 41 women. So where is the overwhelm in numbers that they want us to think about? And then what do you, and I know this is a multi-part question, when you're going in and you're having those raw conversations with C-suite, what role can you take to help create a greater sense of awareness, help to shift the narrative, and to create these bridges so that we truly have a diverse workforce that represents the population that we serve?
Yeah, it was tough before, and it's becoming increasingly more difficult, to be honest. And I'll add another layer, LaWanna, to what you've shared, and that is, it's not just the narrative that there are too many of us in these roles, but it's also the narrative that, excuse me, that those that we're bringing in aren't qualified, that they're being hired just because they look a certain way, and that is absolutely false. I don't know any organization no successful organization is hiring someone who is unqualified and giving them a position of leadership simply because of their race or their gender. That just doesn't happen. It doesn't make any sense because you cannot be successful operating that way. So that's another false narrative that we're having to combat. So, how I approach that when I go into organizations, I start with what matters most to those leaders, right? Their bottom line. Let's talk about your bottom line. Because if you want to meet and exceed the numbers for your organization in terms of revenue and revenue growth year over year, you need people of color. You need diversity in your organization because the data shows time and time again that organizations who have diverse leadership perform better. Even more, the data shows that when you have women in those senior leadership positions, not only does the company perform better, but your employees are more engaged. They're happier in their roles. So that's why I start with what matters. Help me understand what your values are. Help me understand what your goals are. And then trust me, having been a senior executive in corporate America and working with top leaders, to help you chart a path that will get you there. And that absolutely has to include diverse leadership. One of the things that I tell those leaders is if you're sitting in your boardroom and everyone generally looks the same and everyone generally thinks the same way, you have a problem. You have a problem that may not show up immediately, but it eventually will. Because if everyone thinks the same, you're going to miss out on opportunities because nobody's bringing a dissenting opinion. No one has a diverse perspective, regardless of what they look like. Are they bringing fresh thoughts or ideas, or are you creating an environment that basically operates on groupthink?
I'm gonna challenge that. See what you have to say. So you're there. Some are in favor of what you're saying, but others may oppose because they're looking at yesteryear, right? And they're saying, well, I hear what you're saying, Lisa, but think about the legacy companies that existed today. We didn't have representation.
Mm-hmm.
We did just fine. We're still here. So why does it really matter?
Yeah, that is a great pushback. It matters because we're not operating in yesteryear anymore. That's why it matters. In today's economy, with the business world now is increasingly more global, right? And you absolutely will not be able to continue to keep pace with the increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex and world that we're living in today with all of its ambiguity when everyone thinks the same. Where does the creativity come from? Where do you get the fresh perspective and new ideas? Who are the people in your organization that have the strategic foresight to recognize what's coming next, not just operating in the now? And so many leaders are being short-sighted in this season, and they're operating in the now based on the current administration, based on the current trends, but that won't last. It might feel like it's going to be forever, but it won't. The pace of change, I don't care who's in leadership, whether it's inside our organizations, in the government, it's changing rapidly and we have to keep pace with it. And the only way to do that is to invite diverse perspectives. That's how you get the innovation that you need to stay relevant in today's business environment.
Yeah, I love that. And from your marketing perspective, I would like you to address the audience from, positioning and staying relevant means being able to understand these emerging populations, right? How do you serve them? How are they even going to be trusting enough to let you come in to assess what their needs are? Or are you just going to discount the bulk of the world that happens to be Black and brown? Yeah. I'll toss that one over to you.
Yeah,
I told you it's raw talk.
I love it. Listen, whether you accept the realities of the world or not, right? The world is changing. And you can ignore the data. It doesn't change the facts, right? Truth is truth, whether you accept it or not. And the reality is the world, especially here in the world is changing, but in the US, we are becoming more brown. it's just, it's just the reality. And so when I go into an organization, I'm talking with leaders and their teams, I'm trying to help them see the realities of the new world of work and to think beyond today to what do you think the world will look like a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? For those who are willing and able to step back a little bit from their current focus and really think strategically, it becomes easier to get them to see the value in needing to change. For those who reject that, it's kind of like there's a scripture that says if you go into someone and they don't receive you, shake the dust off
Dust
your
off your feet.
and keep moving. And that's really what we have to do. We will not win everyone. That's just the reality, right? Some
Yes.
people will hold fast to their beliefs. And the beauty of it is they get to do that. They get to do that. But for those who are willing to hear another perspective, to really look at the data, the real data, the true data, um, they are understanding that there is a need. So what they're doing now is trying to find more creative ways to move forward and to operate, still having diversity, et cetera, without upsetting the governmental apple cart. Can I say it that way?
Yes. Well, we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, I want us to talk about, you mentioned that you're able to teach and empower individuals to lead from an extraordinary place. Because you said when we're able to do that, that's when we're the most powerful and authentic in our being. We'll be right back. You know, one of the things I was thinking about when looking at that and looking at the things that you help individuals with, from salary negotiations to career progression, fear often holds us back, right? We fear just stepping out. We live in that, well, what if, right? And it causes us to be paralyzed, or we're in the state of denial and we don't take the step. Because often fear isn't about what we're currently dealing with, it's what could possibly happen. And you have this framework called GROW. So if you can unpackage, you know, what is that? What makes you, with this framework, kind of the best viable option today? And why corporations need individuals like you at the table? And how do you tie that back to that executive leader and that team and being able to lead from that extraordinary place?
Yeah, thanks for that question. The GROW coaching process that I use, GROW stands for gain insight, realize new possibilities, overcome obstacles, and win at life and in leadership. So the first step is gaining insight, because that's going to give you the information that you need to begin realizing those possibilities. So that insight could be into what's happening in the environment around me, what's coming next, insight into self. Who am I really? What do I value? What is my purpose? Once you have that information, you've got the data you need, you have the internal insight that you need, you've looked at the external environment and taking in that information. Using that information, then it now unlocks you to begin to envision more possibilities. That newfound insight creates the awakening so that you're not operating from a place of fear. And I always tell clients, as you said, LaWanna, people will have those what ifs. Our what if scenarios are often negative. What if this doesn't work? What if I fail? And I ask them to answer that question. Don't allow it to just sit out there and paralyze you. If you say, well, what if I fail? Now answer it. If you fail, first of all, what will failure look like? If you do, then what steps will you take? That's where we're learning to overcome obstacles, right? We're anticipating the roadblocks that we might experience. We're answering those what if questions so that we can form a plan so that we're not caught off guard when we do run into an obstacle. But I also encourage them to think of positive what ifs. What if this is more successful than I expect it to be? What if the transformation happens sooner than I expect it would? What will I do then? And answer those questions. So you have a full plan. Now that you know what's possible, you have a full plan to overcome any obstacles. And then you can get to the winning part. Winning looks like defining what success is for you so that it aligns with your insight, it aligns with your values, etc. And it is taking into account not just what happens in business, but it really is about where we started, that best life definition. That's what winning looks like. Are you living your best life? And that becomes a continuous process of growing so that you're constantly evaluating as you get new insights, you have new possibilities, you have some more obstacles. So that's that continuous level of ascending from one level of growth and success to the next.
Yeah, I love that. And, the one thing that I was thinking about is business goes through its cycles, right? So business theory, business practice. And right now we are in a rapid change environment. So I'm a strategist. And as I was listening to you, I was thinking, because I have a system called the R3 that has some elements, but it's a little different in how you overlay it on strategic planning. This, you're taking it and dealing with the individual in their corporate and professional presence. But where we intersect is when you're saying gain insight, because often we want to jump to wherever it is, right? But we're not assessing like what does the environment look like that we're saying we want to be in? Do we have what we need in order to maximize our opportunity for success? Do we have the alliance and allies that we need? Because we know in executive leadership, that allyship, those strategic partnerships and relationships are very critical for your division and team successes. And then I love what you said about realizing the possibility and shifting that instead of saying, what if, looking at it from a positive spin, the good possibilities, not the adverse things. When you do that, I want to toss this back to you. I believe that actually gives your team a sense of empowerment because you've placed them in this dreamscape, this place of reimagining, this place of empowerment, this place of being seen and heard and feeling that they're really part of this greater so what that is driving something more than the bottom line. I mean, I get the bottom line is important corporate, but as part of the movement, I have to know that it's not that I'm just trying to win, Coca-Cola, another 50, 60 million. It's what's the so what on the other end of that dollar, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What's the so what? And having those extra dollars, what does that give you the freedom to do? Because that really is ultimately what it's all about. And that reframing and looking at the positive perspective is so important. It's how I overcame the challenge that I shared when I was back at Microsoft, right? Sometimes the things we can view them as happening to us, but the shift might be, how is this working for me? And the reality is, though that situation was tough, it actually worked for me because it pushed me into my purpose. It pushed me into my next level. I had a great career as a result of that negative experience. So was it really negative? Did I fail? Was it? No, it was the catalyst for the next level of change. And so that's what we're inviting teams to do. When I think about this leadership and it's growing, it is one leader at a time. Because if you can transform the leader and their way of thinking and their mindset so that they are elevating their leadership, that leader can then transform the team. And because we're in this increasingly volatile, rapidly changing world, we need inspiration now. Just doing isn't enough. People need to be inspired and motivated to do. They need leaders that they can look up to, leaders that they want to follow, not because of their position, not because of what the leader has done for them, but because that leader is a person, the kind of person that we want to follow. And that's where being becomes more significant than the doing.
I love that. I'm going to ask you this. So we have a lot of coaches and consultants out there. There are a lot of executive coaches out there. And what makes you, in today's environment, given your experience, given your line of sight, what makes you, in your opinion, the best viable option out there? And how can you help those business owners, CEOs navigate successfully in today's marketplace?
Yeah, there are many great coaches and leadership development organizations out there. I am the best viable option for a specific group of leaders and organizations. Those are purpose driven leaders, mission driven organizations who realize that success alone is not enough. They want to move from success to significance so that you're achieving the results, but it's with a purpose that is for the greater good. I am the ideal coach for someone who really does want to create transformation and continuous cycles of growth. So, beyond just a one time experience, that you want to learn and grow and iterate and continue to learn and grow. That's who I'm the best coach for. I am also the best coach for someone who really wants to do the inner work, that they recognize that leadership and development really is an inside out game. So they want to focus on their mindset, their beliefs, their values. They really do want to get clear about what makes them unique. What is their area of greatness, whether that's the individual or the organization, and they want to lead from that space. So they're creating their own path, their own lane for continuous growth, improvement, innovation, and impact. That's who I am uniquely equipped to serve.
I love that. I liked what you said, is that individual who's purpose driven, mission driven, who wants to go from success to significance. And we all hear about, we can measure our outcomes, but what is that impact? What type of influence do you have? Yeah. And we know that when we can shift, as you mentioned, that leadership mindset that translates their behavior and how they communicate with the team, and it actually elevates how highly performing that team becomes. But when you have the opposite, you have people, resigning left and right, like you did. It's like, okay, I always believe people leave jobs for the most part due to bad leadership.
I 100% agree. They're usually leaving the leader or the culture in
Yes.
the organization, because in certain cultures tend to allow bad leadership to continue. And so that's why people quit. And it's detrimental to the long-term health of the organization overall. It cannot survive that way, but for a short period of time. And so I think that's why this work that we do, LaWanna, is so imperative. Now more than ever, people really need those transformational leaders who have a clear sense of being. They also have a new way of seeing the world. So they have a vision that is positive. They have a future perspective, but they're also effective communicators. So they can articulate what they see and translate it in a way that inspires people to want to follow their lead. And then we can get to the doing. Yeah. So now people have a clear vision and they know what their role is in it, and they can begin to act and move to create the results, yes, but also have that positive impact and influence that ultimately the best leaders and organizations have. That's how we shape cultures. So you change one leader, you change the team, you create the positive culture in the organization. And I believe if we do enough of that, we can ultimately change the world.
Yes. Lisa, can you believe we are almost out of time?
It's hard to believe time flies when you're having fun.
Yes. So we're going to do one quick takeaway, and then you'll be back to share your growth. Is it the growth framework?
Framework.
And I know that you have an offer for our audience. So we'll be back in just a moment to hear what Lisa has to share with us.
Business and Financial Raw Talk, a no-holds-barred forum for leaders and innovators with award-winning business strategist and financial analyst, LaWanna Bradford with the Bradford Group. With Raw Talk, we are empowering women to rise and succeed in business and finances and improve the world for the next generation. Get ready to get raw and real. Live each Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern on e360tv.com.
All right, Lisa, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, LaWanna. I want to talk to the leaders who are listening to this. You've worked hard to get where you are and you are successful, but that success has come at a cost. Your time, your peace, maybe even the people that matter. If you're honest, success doesn't feel as meaningful as you thought it would. You may think the problem is you're not doing enough, or you're missing some secret ingredient that other successful leaders have. Your inner critic might try to convince you that you don't deserve a seat at the big table. The truth is, the problem isn't your effort, it's alignment. You've been so busy doing that you haven't had time to consider who you're becoming in the process. And you've given so much of your power to serving other people's purpose that you've lost sight of your own. That's why the success that you've built feels hollow and it's exhausting, frankly. Success without significance is hollow. And leadership should never cost you your peace, your purpose, or the people you care about. When you align your values, your vision, and your voice, you lead from a powerful and authentic place without sacrificing yourself. And that's where my Grow coaching process becomes a catalyst for transformation, helping you to gain insight, realize new possibilities, and overcome obstacles so that you can win in life and in leadership. For example, I work with a client who recently landed her dream job as the COO of a mid-sized technology firm. Within 6 months of taking that position, she said to me, "Lisa, I feel like I'm failing on all fronts. I am so busy and pulled in so many different directions at work that I don't have time to be strategic. And by the time I make it home, I have no energy left for my husband or my kids." Her dream was starting to feel more like a nightmare. But through the growth process, she realized that one of her values was family, and that time with family and that connection was a non-negotiable. She decided that she wanted to be the kind of leader who elevates others. When she made time to think, she also decided that, I need more time for what really matters. And so she made some strategic adjustments to her calendar. Now, as a result of those realizations and that clarity, she took a bold step. She began to delegate more. She trusted her directors to make bigger decisions, and she organized her time around her top priorities so now she can show up fully at work and at home. That's the power of a bold move. I help high achieving leaders and entrepreneurs move from pressure to purpose so that they can lead boldly and live fully. And I'd love to help you too. I created a short training video entitled Bold Moves, 4 Steps to Break Barriers and Build Confidence. And this could be just the thing that you need to break through what's been holding you back so that you can take purposeful action. You can download that training video for free at my website, Ascentum.com/bold moves.
Thank you so very much, Lisa, for just being an amazing guest, for engaging me in this challenging conversation. We got raw and real, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it has been a pleasure. I hope that your listening audience really will see themselves in the conversation and take away something that helps them to shift their perspective to lead more boldly.
Yes, and before we go, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor and speak specifically. Give some words of encouragement and hope to the 300 plus 1,000 African American women who've lost their jobs in the last 3 months.
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. If that is you and you're one of those 300,000 African American women who've lost your job, I want to tell you that what you haven't lost is yourself. You haven't lost the skills that you have. You haven't lost your education or your talent, and you are valuable, far more valuable than any position that you've held. Those skills that you had before, that talent that you can take that with you wherever you choose to go. That may mean starting your own business. That may mean moving into another organization, but know that there will always be room for people like you. Always be room. There is an abundance in this world, and there is truly no lack. If you need help and support to navigate to what's next, to find the best place for you, I would encourage you to find a coach, a counselor, someone that resonates with you, that can help you to navigate through this transition to what's next for you. This happened to you, but who is it for? And how can you use this pivotal moment as an opportunity to propel you to your next and what is best for you?
Thank you so much. I know the listening audience has appreciated you in this conversation, and I look forward to staying connected with you and seeing what's next.
Thank you. Same here.
And to our listening audience, we look forward to seeing you next week for another edition of Business and Financial Raw Talk. And please remember, in life and in business, when your vision intersects with opportunity, success is inevitable. Bye for now.